One of the questions actually from the floor was around the use of the Internet of Things. A lot of the approaches were survey-based, but we're kind of going through this data revolution where we can collect data in different ways, and that nicely segues us into the next presentation, which is from Stellapps, India, who are going to talk about the Internet of Things in the dairy sector in India.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Dr. Peters, for inviting us over here for this meeting. My name is Venkatesh Seshasayee. I'm a co-founder at Stellapps Technologies. There are 5 of us co-founders. We started off in 2011, coming from a technology background, and at that point, to be very honest with you, we wouldn't have been able to differentiate between a cow and a bull. So, coming from there to standing in the midst of you all, livestock experts, so that's been a journey. So thank you for inviting us over. So let me start with the overview of the dairy supply chain. So Stellapps as a company, we focus on technology, Internet of Things specifically, and we apply this in the supply chain in dairy. So we specifically focus on dairy, and livestock for us mean cattle. So in India, what's happening in the dairy sector is that it's a pretty fragmented place with multi-hops in the supply chain. It's a pretty complex supply chain, and with a large portion of milk still remaining in the unorganized sector. By unorganized, what I mean is that you have a whole lot of farmers with very small holding herd sizes. So for example, a typical farmer will hold about 2 to 3 cows in each farm, and that milk might not necessarily enter the organized sector. It might still be just in a subsistence model within a village or within the neighborhood, etc. So that's the significant portion of the farmers in India. And what's happening as we move into the organized sector in milk is that a lot of these farmers here have started to get this milk into what is called a village level collection center, which is typically operated by an operator who is from the same village as the other farmers. So there is this natural trust and bonhomie between the operator and the farmers. And so the farmers feel that there is an element of trust that they can use to get the milk pooled in the collection centers here. It could be an operator who is nominated by a dairy processor, or it could be an independent agent who is just working on behalf of the farmers to link them up into the value chain. But what we are seeing, interestingly, as we're improving our spread in the organized sector, is that there are a whole lot of dairy processors coming into this area here and setting up their infrastructure, their technology, their equipment, etc., and getting the benefit of these data. You could say technologies that drive data upstream at this level here, the collection center. I'll speak about that a little more as well. So, and then what's also happening is that once the milk gets pooled in the collection centers here, you need to have something that starts preserving the milk at 4 degrees, right? So we have chilling centers that predominantly are set up by dairy processors today in India, that are lifted from these collection centers by way of milk cans, aluminum, steel, whatever you have, and then they go into these chilling centers here that are predominantly operated by the dairy processors, and then that then goes into the dairy processor here. So what we intend to do in Stellapps is to get into this entire value chain here. This is not something we are here at today, but we play a role in the farm level by way of our technology intervention. We play a role here. We are in close to about 25,000 villages in India today, and we play a role here. We are yet to get in here, but we do have partners. So we are not going to be doing it all by ourselves. We're going to have a partner ecosystem. I'll talk about that as well. So what's happening here is interesting in the collection center. So we have the farmers coming in here. Why do they go into the collection centers? The primary purpose is to make money from the milk that they're giving, right? So this is where the pricing of the milk is happening. So what's happening is that for every liter of milk that comes in here into the chilling center, the farmer is paid in rupees, Indian rupees, based on quality. So interestingly, in India, quality is just a function of the components of the milk and not real quality per se in terms of is the nutrition preserved, is the taste preserved, etc. Today, the metric of surrounding pricing is around fat and other solids in milk. So that might change, and in fact, we believe that we could be a vehicle of change also by way of introducing other quality parameters. For instance, there's a metric called MBRT. Many of you that deal with milk and quality of milk might know this. It's a test to understand is there bacterial load in the milk beyond a level of threshold. So by way of introducing more tests and more mechanisms at the collection center, there's a way to improve the quality parameters that we will be using. But today, as things stand, it's presence of solids in the milk that is used as a quality parameter to pay back the farmer for the milk that's coming into the collection center. And hereafter, it's mostly a logistics play, predominantly moving the milk from one area to one hop to another hop, and then get milk chilled in large chilling centers, etc. So the key aspect here, the reason that we speak about the supply chain here is because India, several decades ago, I think 6-7 decades ago, had a problem of milk availability. So we had to import milk, and the National Dairy Development Board in India did a fantastic job of being able to get to a point where we have now surplus milk in India, right? We are talking about exporting milk. We're not talking about importing at all any longer. And farmers realize that milk is giving them instant gratification in some sense, right? I just get the milk in, I get the money back in, say, a couple of days, rather than the traditional agricultural practices where we have to harvest for over a 3-month, 6-month period, etc. So that's been a fantastic change over the last 6 decades in India when it comes to milk. So now, as we move along, we are now focusing harder on the aspect of the farm now, right? I'll speak about that as well. So this is a little dark, but this is an example of a chilling center where you can see there are a whole bunch of farmers waiting in the queue here, and there is an operator here. I apologize for the dark image here. So what he's actually doing here is running a system here that's taking a sample of the milk that this farmer is getting in here, and then testing for quality. By quality, I mean the solids again, and then accepting the milk and paying back the farmer money in terms of the quantity of milk poured at a certain quality level, right? And then these cans are what are transported into these larger chilling centers, which are downstream as you go towards the processing plants. And this is where you can see a whole bunch of cans here that are getting tested again, and then get accepted into the chillers, and then the tanker moves. There's a tanker that comes in here, picks up this milk, and moves into the processing plant maybe a day later. So what's actually happening is that when you digitize the value chain, what you'll notice is that the data of the farm or the data of the milk from the farm goes to the dairy processors 24 hours or 48 hours in advance of the milk that reaches the processing plant. That's a play we want to get involved in, because that's something you could do, something about managing the quality better at the processing level as well. Yeah, so this is a snapshot of the marketplace. I spoke about the unorganized sector as well as the organized sector. So as things stand today, overall milk production, I would say it's rather anecdotal because there's no one who can peg a number at this value in an official sense. So roughly by various estimates, by different types of triangulation, we are arrived at about 480 million liters of milk per day available at large, of which 145 million liters per day is in the organized sector. By organized sector, I mean we have formal dairy processors using this milk to come up with actual products in the market. It could be liquid milk or it could be value-added products, etc. So the interesting part also is that this is growing at having a good growth rate of about 20% year after year. So which means that you have more and more farmers coming into the formal network and getting perhaps better remuneration for the milk that they are giving into the supply chain, right? The other interesting thing to notice here is that milk and animal value together represent about 7.6% of India's GDP. That's a phenomenal number, and so draws enormous attention from the government and maybe other bodies as well in India. Yeah, so I know livestock is the focus and the fulcrum of the group here, but then as an organization, we take a rather supply chain view or a value chain view, and not just livestock. Livestock is important. In fact, interestingly, Stellapps, when Stellapps started off, we started work at the farm level. Our first product was at the farm level. We built India's first electronic milk meter for measuring yield, productivity, somatic cell count, etc. But that's the view we had at that time. And then we realized that to make an impact at the farm level, we couldn't just focus only at the farm level. We need to take a supply chain view and then come back to the farm. And that's exactly where we stand right now. We moved away from the farm. We went a little deeper into the supply chain, understood the problems of the supply chain, because finally, all said and done, a chain is only as good as the weakest link in it, right? If the weakest link breaks, the chain breaks. So can we strengthen each node in the chain is the fundamental idea that we started to get as a business. So what's happening why do we not just focus on livestock? Why don't we just look at making animals better, getting better genetics into the field, get better productivity, etc.? Is this an isolated problem? You can't make it an isolated problem. The reason is that you have, as I mentioned earlier, you have a whole lot of farmers in India with about 2 to 3 cattle per farm. And then each of them today live on a subsistence basis, because for them dairy today is not a livelihood option yet. The reason it's not a livelihood option is because the cost per liter that they earn in the current model of supply chain is not enough for them to say, let me grow my, you could say, enterprise. Assuming that a farmer is considered an entrepreneur, assuming that his 2 to 3 cows should be migrated onto, let's say, a 5-6 cow platform, it's not, the current model is not enough for him to move into that sphere yet. So that's part of the work that we're trying to do, to see if we can move farmers in this portion here into a larger enterprise. I would say by large, I don't mean like large cows that we typically know in the Western countries. We're talking about moving a really, really small farmer with 2 to 3 cows into a slightly larger farm with, say, 5 to 6 cows, maybe 10 cows, maybe up to 20 cows, etc. Make him feel that dairy is really a livelihood option for him. Today it is not, and the idea is to take him there as we go along. The problem we suffer with these small holding farmers is that it's really, really poor productivity. We're talking about every farmer coming into the collection centers with about 5 liters per day, right? The best that he's going to make in a day for those 5 liters is about, you could say, an average 30 rupees, which is 150 rupees per day, right? And it's not enough to, it's a trickle of an income for him, but that's okay. I mean, just any additional money is helpful, but not enough to drive him towards making it a sustainable livelihood option. And so naturally, there's no profitability for him, if at all. I mean, traditionally, farmers have been leaking money in dairies, not really, so profitability is not the right word there. Loss, managing loss is the better word. But that's, again, it has got a historical perspective in that, as I said earlier, as mentioned earlier, a few decades of intervention has been primarily on getting more and more and more milk into the chain, into the supply chain. Because we wanted India to become self-sufficient with milk. Quality can come later, but then we can talk about quantity. Can we make more milk available? So that's been the historical perspective. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's what happened, and we have got to a stage where now we are the largest producer of milk, right? I think India is home to the largest bovine population in the world, and it's also the largest producer of milk, and that's good news in many, many ways. Now is the time to focus on quality. So the reason is that yield per cow is amongst the lowest. So we're talking about an average lactation of about yielding about 1,500 liters per lactation, as compared to a very healthy lactation of, say, around 10,000 liters. Right? We are like really, really a fraction of what is possible there. So that's the real intent here. And how do we intend to do it, right? Can we use tech? Can we use combination of technology, data, and then the right domain expertise? For example, I have my colleague, Dr. Thomas here, who comes from animal science background. So we just can't be tech alone. That's the point I'm trying to make. It can be a combination of tech, data, plus the expertise that comes in and says, can we move these farmers here from this domain to this domain here? And can we target better productivity per animal? And then get them to better profitability through the supply chain, because no one is going to pay farmers better cost for milk if the market is not going to accept it, right? So can we make market the driver for some of these aspects? And I think we've been discussing a lot of these aspects from yesterday's discussion also. Bruno Santos was talking about the value chain impact that can drive farm level efficiency, etc., right? So I think that's the crux. And the bottom line here is, sorry. The bottom line here is that the farm side unit economics is clearly a function of backward demand. So in Stellapps, we call it demand backwards model, in that you don't say, I have more milk and I'm going to supply to you. We rather say, there is a demand, can you supply me? So it's more of that nature of the thinking that we have here. The very good news in the current market is that India has a very good appetite for high quality milk and value-added dairy products. A few decades ago, this would have been the middle class that would have been deciding the market. But then today we have a whole lot of urban consumers that are coming forth and saying, I'm willing to pay better if I know the nutritional value of milk that I'm going to consume is intact, right? Can I get a certification of safety on the milk packet that I'm getting home every day? And they're willing to pay for it, right? That's a premium that they're willing to pay. And that's the good news here. So the intention is to see if this, and by the way, value-added dairy products are going to give the dairy process better margins. Can that translate to something at the farm level and say, then look at how to improve the productivity at the farm level, right? So let the market drive, let's say, let the better margins in the market drive efficiencies at the farm level. So this is fundamentally the crux of how we are planning to achieve it. We are looking at productivity at the farm level. We are looking at quality, which is also at the farm level, of course. But then do notice that once the farmer hands over the collection milk to the collection center, he's no longer responsible for quality, right? He says, I'm done. I just need to get paid for the milk that I'm giving you. From here is where preservation of the quality becomes important, because this is the longest hop up to the processing plant. This is typically, as things stand today, right? A farmer walks about, let's say, half a kilometer from his home to the collection center and deposits milk. But thereon, you need to have the logistics in place to make sure that the quality is preserved, and you have, let's say, a limited MBRT, or rather bacterial load in the milk, and then you also are making sure that the chilling center protocols are adhered to by way of preserving temperature of milk at 4 degrees with least bacterial load infusion, etc. So several things that we can do here. Also notice that there is an element of traceability here. By traceability, we do not mean that we go back and figure out what's the exact drop of milk. That's impossible, because the minute you start taking 2 farmers' milk in here, you've already pooled milk. You can't trace it back to the single farmer. The idea of traceability is, can I preserve the, you could say, for example, the cold chain protocols to make sure that I don't have any problems back. I can trace back the problems of a break in the protocol to a certain level, maybe at the collection center or maybe at the chilling center. Can I trace back detection? For example, antibiotics play a big role in the quality of milk. Can I trace back where did antibiotics come from in a sample of milk, or in a, let's say, tanker load of milk? Can I trace it back to certain, let's say, a group of farmers, and then try to isolate that milk, right? So these are some of the elements where we are looking at some of the products that we deployed at each of these nodes are helping us get us these data points that can play a role here. For instance, can a farmer who's injected his animals with antibiotics, since we look at that data here at the farm level, can that data be harnessed at the collection center level to say, the farmer that's coming in here seems to be getting the same quantity of milk, but I know that this guy is injected antibiotics. Can that milk be isolated here, right? So that's an example of leverage across this digital platform here. So when we get down into the details of the farm level, so this is what we see. We see that data analytics are dependent upon the quality of the raw data. I think that's a common view that all of us have here anyway. And there's a whole lot of data that's coming through human intervention today. Can we look at changing that from purely human-driven to a lot of tech-driven or, let's say, device-driven or digital-driven inputs? But of course, we do recognize that human intervention cannot be avoided. Automate data capture where possible. And then, very interestingly, so we need to look at how to make the farmers feel less overwhelmed about tech intervention at the farm level. The more you have tech there, the likelihood that the farmer is going to misuse or not use the system at all is very high. So this is an effectively to say that you need to look at using democratized approaches to data collection process. An interesting lesson is that we do not want to tell farmers, please start using portals, etc. We just want to push content to the farmers, don't want them to getting to portals and start looking at data, why will a farmer understand lactation curves? Right? I mean, we would rather tell him, you please provide micronutrients of so-and-so level to a so-and-so cow. That's good enough, because he understands cows, he understands nutrition, but he's not going to understand lactation curves. So, and this point came up yesterday also, in that can individual farmers shape up to become role models, right? So that can influence behavior in a, let's say, village, for example. Can he understand more of what he's doing, so he can pass off the ideas that he has also understood to his neighbors and to his fellow farmers. So this is the essence of the tech intervention at the farm level. I don't want to go into details, but I'm happy to answer questions on this. Again, the summary of this is not to say that we as an organization are going to be doing every single bit of this. This is where we also partner with our ecosystem partners and see what we can do of this. For example, we are looking at animal variables at the small farm level, and this may not be economical at an individual farm, so we look at village as a farm model, right? We're looking at a collection of farmers that go that will be giving us the data at a village level rather than at a farm level. And then, of course, there's a herd management. There are plenty of such solutions available. We do have one as well. So what we're interestingly seeing is that I spoke about democratized devices. What do I mean by that? I mean that we should be looking at technology that's available at the fingertips of the farmer. Can a farmer look at leveraging what he has by way of, let's say, his smartphone, which is a camera, right? Can he use visual imaging of the animals to look at, say, facial recognition, or let's say, for instance, skin conditions, etc. And then, but the farmer doesn't have to know what to do further, right? Something else happens in the background. That's the magic, right? That's the tech magic. So can we look at such examples of input that we can use at the farm level to get data without any human biases? We're also looking at things like natural language processing driven voice user interface. So in other words, we're telling the farmer, you just pick up whatever you want into the phone, and then you have whatever inputs you want. We will figure out how to act upon it. For instance, the farmer could simply say he's injected antibiotics to a given cow with the cow number so on. So we'll figure out what to do next, right? So we're also looking at analysis of feed at the farm level. And this is not a laboratory we're talking about. We're talking about very simple NIR and MIR devices that are available, low footprint devices I'm talking about, that are available, that can be carried in portable units into the farm, and then you can look at soil conditions, you can look at fodder conditions, etc., analyze the fodder for carbs, for, let's say, protein levels, etc., and then you can look at what should be the right composition that can be going back to the cattle. We're looking at financial models also, and then, of course, we are looking to contribute to genomic data. So I don't claim to be a genetic scientist, etc. So, but we do understand the value that some of the interventions can bring to partners. Like, for example, if some of this data were to come into a livestock data portal, right? This could be of enormous value to someone else in the ecosystem, right? So that's the kind of intervention we are talking about here. Yeah, so these are all specifics about some of the data capture that we do by way of, let's say, an activity meter at the farm level, and thermal imaging. And this, again, thermal imaging should not be shouldn't be looked at as a very complex piece of imaging that we're doing. We're just talking about a simple, low footprint device that can be attached to a smartphone, and these are examples of such devices we're talking about here. Yeah, so it's again the computer vision. And the blockchain. So yesterday we had a small chat about why not use blockchain as a platform to look at data dissemination and sharing, right? Why should it have to be APIs? Why can we look at, for example, if you have an organization of, if I have an ecosystem of 10 organizations working at the common data here, should I have a mesh of 10 APIs across? It's a 10 cross 10 API mesh, right? So can we eliminate that? Can we look at blockchain? I'm talking about permission blockchains. I'm not talking about public blockchain because there's a whole lot of problems we have to go through in a public blockchain. So I'm not recommending that. I'm talking about a private blockchain where we have a consortium which can look at having cattle data, having genetics data, having farmer data, etc. Can we learn from some of the experiments from the FAO stat, etc. Can look at enabling those into these permission blockchains in some limited sense, of course. I recognize that the data can be really massive, but what can be of immediate gratification? Can that be put onto a permission blockchain so you have immediate access to data when someone is publishing it? Yeah, that's it. So I'm in the last slide here. Thank you. So this is the end goal, right? All this is fine, the tech is fine, the NLP is fine, the thermal imaging is fine, but what does it mean to the farmer eventually? So what we're actually trying to do, and this is the reality today as I speak, it's not just a slide that I'm putting up here. So what we've tried to do with all the data and with all the interventions at the farm level is that we've tried to create a whole, let's say, plethora of services that the farmer can access on a platter by way of, for example, cattle level, right, access, and that's where my colleagues from BIF have played a fantastic role in getting down to the farm level with these kind of services. And then we're talking about insurance companies and banks going to farmers. Banks would just not touch the farmers. They still don't because they're not, they're a credit risk. But we are looking at using our data along with the traditional credit scoring mechanisms to look at how farmers can be given credit against, say, for example, the milk receivables, right? It's not a collateral-free system. We're talking about, I know that the farmer is given 25 liters of milk. Can I give him loan against that receivables that is due for the farmer, right? So these are all some of the services that we're now trying to get start rolling in the farm level based on the data that we have got at the farm plus the supply chain. So that's about it. So thank you for your attention.